Cameron, in a sense, is in contempt of the ICC process. I cannot approach a judge because I'm a member of Parliament and say, listen, sir, I don't like the way you're handling this case. I want you to find in a different way. That judge would probably haul me straight before the court as being in contempt of court. And he would be right, or she would be right to do that. And so the same principle must apply in international law as well. Well, I think it wasn't really necessary for her to bring all that up in the interview, but that's what she decided to do. The party did adopt the IHRA definition. Personally, I was more in favour of the Jerusalem Declaration, which is simply saying that anti-Semitism is wrong. It is wrong to be anti-Semitic, and it is perfectly possible to discuss the politics and behaviour of the State of Israel without being anti-Semitic.
Do you foresee the end of the two-party system?
Yes, I do. Do you know what? You're going to enjoy it.
It'll be fun to cover.
We'll make it fun for you, don't worry about that.
Hello, my name is Imran Mullah. I'm Middle East Eye's UK political correspondent, and I'm here in Finsbury Park to speak to Jeremy Corbyn, the former Labour leader, who's now a key figure in the establishment of a new left-wing political party. We're going to talk about the formation of the new party, the problems facing the country today, and Britain's role in Israel's genocide in Gaza. Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much for speaking to Middle East Eye.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to your programme, and welcome to Finsbury Park.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely.
This is known as the Owen Jones table.
It was a very nice table.
Every few years he interviews me at this table. The trees have got bigger.
Yeah. So in 2019, you were leader of the Labour Party, of Her Majesty's opposition as it was then. Now, 6 years later, you're co-leading the founding of a new party which could cause untold damage to Labour. I mean, that's quite a journey you've been on.
Well, it's not really a journey of change, because my politics haven't changed at all. My views haven't changed.
It's a party that's changed.
Indeed. I was proud to lead the Labour Party. It was very challenging, and I was seriously undermined by many people, particularly in the Parliamentary Labour Party. But we did change a lot of policies, and we did gain the biggest membership of any political party in Europe and the highest vote Labour's had this century. So I'm not apologising for all that, but obviously we lost the 2019 election, and the consequences of that are very serious for the people of this country. The Labour Party suspended me after my response to the EHRC report, Equality and Human Rights Committee report on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and I stand by the comments I made. I said, one anti-Semite is one anti-Semite too many, and that there were a lot of vexatious claims and a lot of unfair things said about me and other people in the party. I stand by both of those comments. I was suspended from party membership and then reinstated, and then Keir Starmer then ensured I was suspended as a member of the Parliamentary Party, and then on a motion put by him denied the right to be a Labour candidate, in which he said I was not fit to hold public office, i.e. being a member of Parliament, which is a very strange thing to do for somebody who had been in my shadow cabinet and been elected alongside me to Parliament in the same election. They then said Islington North could not choose its own candidate, i.e. have a chance of even an opportunity of voting for me or not. So I said the people should decide. So I stood as independent and won. A lot of pressure since then to form a political party, which I'm not saying I was reluctant to do. I was concerned to be prepared and get it right. And so eventually we announced for a year since the general election that we've set up this thing called yourparty.uk, and that will lead to a founding conference in all probability in November. Hundreds of thousands of people have signed up. They won't all become members, but many will. And it's exciting. And the 5 principles behind the party are: 1, peace. Therefore, no bombs to Israel to drop on Gaza, for example. They are about economic justice within our society. They are about dealing with the worst vestiges of poverty within our society. They are about environmental sustainability, and they are about public ownership of public services. But it's also about the kind of creativity and democracy we are. So when you bring people together in a creative endeavour through local forums and grassroots democracy, you defeat the far right, you defeat the racists by our organisation together. So Nigel Farage needs to be very aware that we're out there and we're offering something different, which he can't. We're offering hope.
Well, you were elected, as you said, last year in July on a platform that included opposition to British support for Israel's genocide in Gaza. There were 4 other MPs who were also elected as independents on the same platform as well as on other issues, and you very quickly became an independent alliance. But I understand that you didn't actually know each other before the election. So how did this alliance actually come to be?
Well, it was a coalition of the willing.
Right.
I had not had the pleasure of meeting the colleagues before, and so I got in touch with them all. As being the longest serving MP, I thought it was my responsibility to do that. I called them all up and congratulated them on being elected and invited them to come to my office for tea.
Right.
So it was very proper. We had a big round table, we sat down, had tea, good chat, and we have broadly similar political direction in the sense of obviously issues of Gaza, there is no disagreement at all. Generally on economic and social justice issues in the same direction. And so we decided we'd form an independent alliance, which means that we meet once a week, our staff all work together with each other, we share out strategies of how to ask questions and do things, and if something arises where we're not all of the same mind, fine. We make our own points, known, we don't attack each other. That's the baseline is. And when it comes to the many statements the government has made on Gaza or on global justice and peace issues, we put together a series of questions we want to ask. We want to ask about, for example, RAF Akrotiri. We want to ask about arms supplies. You want F-35 jets. You want to ask about military training. You want to ask about overflying. A whole lot of different issues surrounding Gaza and the West Bank. We're guided by information we get from Palestine Solidarity, from Medical Aid for Palestine, and the very helpful daily information I get from my good friend Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. We then work out who's going to pursue which area of discussion so that the 5 of us all ask a question in sequence. And so we build this thing up, and then we've put some of this together in sequential videos to show that as a group we've managed to work quite effectively together. We do cooperate, of course, with colleagues in other parties. We do work with Richard Bergen and others on issues of law and arms sales, and we obviously attend, or somebody is always at all the Palestine demonstrations, usually me.
And now Zahra Sultana has left Labour, joined the Independent Alliance. So you're a bigger bloc in Parliament than Reform, and that's already a formidable force. But the 2 of you announced the formation of a new party, and I saw a poll today that 1/3 of people who voted for Labour in 2024 would consider voting for this party. And that's extraordinary given that it hasn't even got a name. And the fact that it hasn't been named yet, and I believe members will decide the name at a conference later this year, suggests this is a very different party structurally from the established parties.
I'm determined it's not going to be parliamentary-based, centralised, top-down party. And it's certainly not going to have anything like the overweening bureaucracy of the Labour Party, which controls just about everything. And it certainly won't be leadership by fear within the party, which is how the Labour Party operates. It will be grassroots, it will be democratic. Sometimes it will be very complicated, sometimes it will even appear slightly contradictory, but above all, the basic points are peace, justice, equality, environmental sustainability, and above all, inclusion of people and giving young people some sense of hope. And so, for example, through the Peace and Justice Project, we've done a whole lot of work, including the Gaza inquiry, which I hope we'll be able to come on to talk about, We've also done a lot of creativity. So we've done music concerts, music for the many, as well as our books, poetry for the many, and a book about the arms trade. So it is about creativity and thought. And what I always wanted in the Labour Party was a community organising basis and that sense of creative endeavour of the party. So it's going to be exciting. Do you know what? You're going to enjoy it.
It'll be fun to cover.
We'll make it fun for you. Don't worry about that.
Great. Now, you've had a lot of experience as leader of the Labour Party in dealing with the political establishment and the mainstream media. Is your approach going to be different this time? And the reason I ask this is that Zara Sultana did a recent interview where she said that the Labour Party under your leadership was wrong to have adopted the controversial IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And she said the smears won't work anymore and that she's proudly an anti-Zionist. What do you think about all that?
Well, I think it wasn't really necessary for her to bring all that up in the interview, but that's what she decided to do. The party did adopt the IHRA definition. Personally, I was more in favour of the Jerusalem Declaration, which is simply saying that anti-Semitism is wrong. It is wrong to be anti-Semitic, and it is perfectly possible to discuss the politics and behaviour of the State of Israel without being anti-Semitic. People do that all the time. Indeed, many people in Israel do that all the time. And so our party will have a resolutely anti-racist position, and I'm looking to put some kind of general declaration of respect for all communities, all ethnicities, all languages, all faiths and no faiths. And so it'll be a general anti-racist position. I was under a great deal of pressure to adopt the IHRA. That happened. The majority of the National Executive, a huge majority, including people who are very close to me, wanted it adopted, and that was duly done. And then later, the examples were also adopted, which I personally had the greatest concerns about, because I think a definition that requires examples to give it life and legs shows to me there's something badly wrong with the definition in the first place. But now, even the authors of the IHRA declaration now disown it. So maybe it's time to move on into a general anti-racist position. I've been on every single one of the anti-war demonstrations, the anti-Gaza war demonstrations. And all of those marches have had a very large Jewish bloc on them. There's always been Jewish speakers at all of the events. And so the idea that it is solely people who are non-Jewish who are opposing what Israel's doing is wrong. It is a human response to a disgusting situation.
You've said that this party is going to be very diverse and it will have to bring together a broad coalition of people in order to be successful. And that includes, obviously, reform voters. Yeah. Now, what would you say to a reform voter who maybe actually agrees with you on lots of economic questions, but wants a dramatic reduction in migration? How would you win that voter over?
What I would say to them is, your problems are the same as many of the people you're complaining about. Your problems of expensive housing, your problems of insufficient spaces in local schools for education, your problems of hospital waiting lists, none of those were created by people who've fled wars and oppression to try and seek a place of safety. Your problems are because of economic austerity. Your problems are because of economic inequality within our society. And so we'd put that question out there. And you know what? When people are in a workplace together and the employer's behaving unreasonably, they band together in a union. They band together to try and improve the situation. At that point, they simply don't care what the ethnicity is, what the language is, what the colour of the person is alongside them. What they care about is the injustice that's being done. When you build community solidarity to defend hospitals and nurseries, to improve parks, to improve local transport, people come together and work together. What Farage and company do is just play on fears and always blaming refugees for it and saying the invasion of the boat people. Well, those people are desperate. I've met them in Calais. met some that have finally made it here. They want to contribute to the world, they want to survive, and you know what? They're going to be our teachers, they're going to be our doctors, they're going to be our lawyers, they're going to be our engineers, they're going to be our cab drivers. That's the way the world moves on. And so if the world can welcome Ukrainian refugees, and it has, and rightly so, then you can say the same about refugees coming from Palestine, from Syria, from Iraq, from Libya, or wherever else. But the key is surely to deal with the issue at source. Deal with the question of wars and human rights abuse and economic inequality.
Now, on this topic, we're 1 year on from racist far-right riots which raged across the country, actually, for over a week. Recently, there have been a series of protests outside hotels housing asylum seekers. Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, actually attended one of these protests and lent his support to it. What do you think of that?
Well, I think he's deeply irresponsible in his attitude and his behaviour. He knows full well that if you don't give asylum seekers a right to work, and you spend months, if not years, processing their case, giving them insufficient money to live on, and giving them a very basic form of accommodation somewhere, then you've got their frustrations and you've got perceptions that they're being treated differently to the rest of the community, which he, GB News, the Daily Express, the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph provoke day in, day out. And I think Jenrick ought to understand that. Well, he does understand that, but he's a cynical politician who believes that he can prevent Tory votes going to reform by this. And so I would say you need to bring people together. You need to bring people together to support people in their hour of greatest need.
Now, Starmer's favourability ratings are at an all-time low, and there's increasing talk that if he goes, he'll be replaced as Prime Minister by the current Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. What do you think of Streeting?
Well, he was never terribly helpful to me as leader of the party. Indeed, he had a quote ready for every occasion, which was always condemnatory, undermining of me in some way, which is, well, it's what he does.
He was on TV a lot during that period, actually.
He was on TV a phenomenal amount of time because there were some TV channels that were very keen to have anyone on that would criticise me all the time. I think his problem has got to be on his record as Health Secretary. He promised to reduce all the waiting lists and waiting times. He promised to properly fund the health service. The reality is it's not properly funded. The reality is people do wait a great length of time. And the reality is that a great deal of money is being made out of the health service by the private sector being invited in to perform functions and services within the NHS. He doesn't seem to understand the principle that public service should not just be of service to the public, but it should also be publicly owned, so that the profit motive isn't there, the service motive is there. I think that's going to be his Achilles heel when people start examining what he's done. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, with a group of nurses at a variety of hospitals, mostly around London. And I was on with another MP, a Labour MP, and we asked them to describe their working arrangements, their working life and so on. And it really struck me how one nurse, and she was strongly supportive of all her colleagues after she'd said this, said that on an average day, she often works an hour or two extra on her shift to wait for the next person to come, because there's such a high vacancy factor maintained because of the debt levels of each hospital. And so she is actually donating to the health service 5-10 hours unpaid work a week. Well, she does that because she believes in the NHS, because she's a person of service. Well, that's not sustainable. That's not the right way to run a public service. And so I think Streeting and Starmer have got to recognise that the public expect there to be decent services, but don't expect them to be run by moral blackmail of those that work in them. And then you look at the question of public ownership. We have a water industry that has been ripped off unbelievably over the past 30 years. It's the worst quality water we've ever had in the rivers and the sea. Pollution levels are very high. The cost is very high of water that we get through our taps. And because of the leakage rate, the disruption of roads and everything else for emergency repairs is dramatic. And so the government then says, well, they're going to regulate it even better than it's been regulated before. We've had 30 years of regulation, and we have a terrible water industry as a result. The only answer is to take it over. And so I raised this in Parliament, as did Clive Lewis and a number of others. The Secretary of State, Steve Reed, said it would cost $100 billion to nationalise the water industry. So I said, where does that figure come from? Who gave you that figure? Where has it come from? He wouldn't answer. I said, come on, you've made the figure, you've made the statement, you said $100 billion. Come on, where is it? No answer. It's a figment of his imagination and a convenient invention. WeOwnIt.com, which is a public ownership campaign, have done a quite serious estimate. They're looking at 15 to 20 billion to take over the water industry, which would be paid for by government bonds. The share price that it would be purchased under, and this is how I would approach public ownership, would be set by Parliament on the basis of the profits that have been taken out, the pollution that's been caused, the unfair executive pay that's been paid, and you start looking at the way we have been ripped off by these speculators, and also the tax advantages they've achieved by registering themselves in the Cayman Islands and other places. Come on, water's a public ownership, public right. Let's have it in public ownership.
What you're conveying now is traditional Labour values, something that Streeting doesn't seem to have much respect for, you think?
No, I don't think he does, actually. I'm not sure. He would say that those are old-fashioned 1940s views. Well, when it suits them, they often talk about the great reforming government of 1945. Well, thank goodness they weren't ministers in the 1945 government. There would have been no National Health Service, there would have been no public ownership, there would have been no Town and Country Planning Act. Instead, what do we have? An infrastructure bill, which is like an open house for the development industry.
Well, Streeting's got another problem as well, which is that he nearly lost his seat, the general election, to Lian Mohammed, a then 23-year-old Palestinian independent candidate. Should Streeting worry for his seat at the next election?
Well, I've been in Ilford with Lian Mohammed, and we had a huge public meeting in Ilford. She chaired it. Andrew Feinstein and myself were the speakers at it, and we took questions, and she had a wonderful way of taking questions. She put a QR code up on a screen behind her. People could read off the QR code and then write in a question, which was then asked immediately by her or me, or Andrew or me.
It's very modern.
Very, very good. I sort of jokingly said to her, say, can I ask myself a question now? Jeremy from Ilford wants to ask Jeremy from Islington or something like that. But it was a very wonderful atmosphere, and I was impressed by the age and ethnic diversity of the meeting. That was an example of the coalition of support she's put together in Ilford. So I would think Streeting has a great deal to be worried about there, but maybe he'll be looking for another constituency, who knows?
Right.
Because the Labour Party is quite prepared to suspend all local democracy when it suits them, despite the leader being elected with a pledge that he would return democracy to the constituencies. As if I'd ever taken it away.
Right. You mentioned Andrew Feinstein. He took quite a lot of votes away from Keir Starmer's majority. So maybe the Prime Minister might be worried about his own seat as well.
I would have thought so. Andrew is a formidable campaigner and very interesting political background, former African National Congress MP in South Africa, and Jewish family. Many of them were lost in the Holocaust, and has enormous empathy with people under stress and under pressure, and is very strongly in support of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank. So very, very hard one for Starmer to oppose. And Andrew did extraordinarily well to get, I think I'm right saying, about 8,000 votes against the leader of the party. And traditionally in British elections, the leader of the party or prime minister gets almost a free pass in their constituency.
Now, I know the new party is about more than just MPs and Parliament, but fast forward to the next general election. How many MPs do you realistically think the party can aim to get in?
We're going to have to be strategic about this, strategic about the constituencies that are fought, and I would urge the local groups, because it's going to be them who make the decisions, to think very carefully about how they can get the best possible results. And if you've got a good independent, Leanne, for example, then obviously you totally back her. What we need to do in the first past the post system is agree on a candidate in each place. But we're going to have a very large number of people fully involved in all this, and that's why 700,000 people have already signed for the party in some way or the other, and that's good. And so they're going to be a force in our society. So it's we're giving oxygen to those people who are fed up with the duopoly of economic thinking and the duopoly of social injustice in our society, and this obsession with always controlling what everybody does through demonstrations or whatever else. Let's have a more open, more liberal society. But above all, let's look about young people. Young people overstressed and over-tested in school, over-indebted if they've been to university, underpaid so often in work, and then exploited in the housing market. Come on, we can do things better than that.
You've said that you've often collaborated with other Labour MPs, Green MPs as well, in Parliament on precisely these issues you're speaking about. Are you expecting any defections from Labour?
The numbers of MPs that have been suspended from Labour goes up and down a bit. They seem to have a sort of informal marking system. They suspend somebody and then they watch their behaviour over the next 3 months and give them 4 out of 10, 6 out of 10 or something. And if they get above 8, apparently they get back in the PLP, which is a fairly bizarre way of doing things. I think there will be more suspensions. I think there will be expulsions, and obviously if those colleagues want to work with us as independents, they'll be very welcome. I know particularly the older Labour MPs very, very well, obviously not so much of the new intake of MPs, and on issues like the cuts in disability benefit that the government was forcing through, I worked very closely together with them on which amendments we'd support. We said, look, let's all get behind this amendment. The one, for example, put by Rachel Maskell. Let's all get behind Rachel's amendment and we'll withdraw our own. And we said that to the Greens as well as the SNP and Plaid. And so, yes, there's been a very effective day-to-day working. And in the chamber, when it's coming up to votes, and over the welfare bill, this was very important, we then cooperated with each other literally minute by minute to make sure we were all in the same place, because sometimes it can be fast moving and quite confusing.
Do you foresee the end of the two-party system? Yes,
I do. I think it is, well, the Tory party and Labour are sort of level pegging at somewhere around 20% or thereabouts. And traditionally, the two-party system has usually attracted up to 90% of the vote, the two parties. The highest duopoly of voting was the 1950 and 51 general elections, when Labour and Tories, I think, shared over 90% of the vote. The next highest, oddly enough, was the 2017 election, when we started from 24% in the polls, and we were rising throughout most of the campaign, and we ended up with around 40% of the vote, 40, 41, something like that. And what happened then was our vote was going up, and then people that were hostile to us but not necessarily pro-Tory in some places probably voted Tory to stop us. And so the other parties all lost support. And then, obviously, you know the result of the 2024 election when the Labour won a loveless landslide on the lowest ever vote for a governing party of less than 34%, I think it was. I think it's time for proportional representation. I don't want to lose the constituency link. I think MPs having a constituency link is very important. I love my constituency. I know it very well. I've represented it for more than half of my life. And I think that link is important. But I recognise the unfairness of the first past the post system. So I would advocate an additional member system so that in order to even up the party support, you would also have a regional list of members to even it up. So it'd be a bit like the German system, which has an election by constituency to the Bundestag, and then it has a list system by which other parties, if they get over 5% of the vote, get a proportion of the seats. The negative of it is it means that if suppose 50 independents got elected on the German system, they would not be represented on the list system because they would all be independents. But I think it's a problem to be discussed. But I would also say our democracy's got to improve. Let's abolish the House of Lords. Let's just get rid of it. Be done with the House of Lords and have a Senate of much smaller, 100, 200, that sort of number. And it would be elected by PR on English economic regions, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And so that way you would have an elected basis for the upper chamber as well. And it would be a revising chamber with much the same proportion of powers between the Lords and the Commons as there is now. But I do think, personally, I do believe in a two-chamber system. Others don't. Some favour a unicameral system. I've got scepticism about that.
We're heading into a period of political transformation, as you've suggested. Do you see yourself being a key part of this new party, a leader?
Well, I'm a young man, you know, I've got lots to do. Listen, I want to see change. I want to see social justice. I want to see a transformation in our society. That's what I've done all my life. That's what I'll do for the rest of my life. Whatever job people want me to do, I'll do it.
Now, in a recent interview, Zara Sultana said that she's learned a lot from you and that she thinks that, well, she likes to think, she says, that she has, that you can learn from her as well. And that could be an argument for co-leading the party. Do you think you have a lot to learn from Zara?
We've all got a lot to learn from everybody else, including Zara. And I do spend an awful lot of time listening to people in my community and elsewhere. And some of the wisest people are not, with the greatest respect to Oxbridge, not necessarily in our universities. There's a great deal of wisdom of rough sleepers on the street. There's a great deal of wisdom of people that work in care and lots of other things. And so what I enjoy about politics is listening to people and their variety, sometimes of contradictory views and opinions. But if you're going to take people on a journey with you, you've got to understand where they are in the first place. So a bit less didactic politics, a bit more listening politics is a good idea. That way you get people walking down the road together.
Right. I want to talk now about Gaza. A few months ago, you put forward a bill in Parliament for a public inquiry, Chilcot style, into Britain's role in Israel's war in Gaza. Unsurprisingly, the government rejected it, so there won't be a public inquiry. But you are holding a Gaza tribunal next month. Could you tell us about that?
I put forward this bill. I have been involved in peace and anti-war movement all my life. And after the Iraq war had finished its most intense phase, we were all demanding inquiry into how the British government had got itself into a position of supporting an illegal war. There was the Butler inquiry, which was generally seen as a bit of a joke, in that it was just a whitewash of the government's position, including not challenging the legal advice that had been suppressed. There was then the Foreign Affairs Committee, Select Committee inquiry, which didn't do very much either. And after a lot of pressure, they eventually appointed Sir John Chilcot to head the inquiry. It was Gordon Brown that did that. And he said he did it because he thought that government needs to learn the lesson. He told me that in a very long conversation I had with him about it. And he said, it's very important that governments learn the lesson for these things. There's been other issues in the past where there's been inquiries after the Falklands War, Frank's inquiry at other times, and so on. So I thought, here we have the ICJ pronouncing on genocide. We have the ICC sending out arrest warrants. We have the appalling vista of children being starved to death in acts of genocide by the Israeli forces in Gaza. And somehow or other, the British government can't bring itself to say all this is illegal. And so I proposed this bill, which was to set up a Gaza inquiry. Under the 10-minute rule, I proposed it. It wasn't opposed by Labour or by anybody else. And so it went through on the nod. At one level, I was pleased. At another level, I would have preferred there to have been a vote. I'd rather it had gone through on a vote. But anyway, that's what happened. It then, to get it to a full second reading debate, it has to get a Friday sitting to do it. And the government can object to the bill, and that prevents it being listed for immediate voting and priority. And so they've objected to it, and so the bill is not going to make any more progress in the House. What I said all along was that I'm quite prepared to organise our own inquiry. So we have, on the 4th and 5th of September, for 2 days in Church House in Westminster, there will be an open public inquiry. It will be live on YouTube and lots of other platforms and channels. And at that inquiry, we'll be hearing the voices from people in Gaza, in the West Bank, aid workers, journalists, lawyers, international legal experts. And we invited, and she's agreed to come, Francesca Albanese, to give evidence as well. And it will be held over 2 days, and there will be a small group of assessors who will assess all the evidence, and it will all be published. It can't change government policy of itself, but it can and will create a debate and a narrative about the dishonesty of the way governments have behaved, the way in which Western European and North American governments behave by continuing to supply weapons to Israel, knowing full well, those bombs are going to drop on schools and kill children.
Well, talking about a debate, a public debate, Middle East Eye recently revealed that David Cameron, as Tory Foreign Secretary, on the 23rd of April 2024, made a phone call to ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan. And in that phone call, he threatened that if the ICC issued arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, the UK would defund and withdraw from the ICC. Now, Le Monde, the French newspaper, have also separately reported on this. No mainstream British newspaper has reported on it at all. Should they report on it? And should the current Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, investigate these reports, given their seriousness, and try and find out what happened in that court?
I think we need to know. We have a right to know as well. And I'm pretty sure this will be mentioned in our own inquiry. I can imagine it will be. And certainly if Middle East Eye wants to make a contribution along those lines, you'll be very, very welcome to do so. I find it quite astonishing that a foreign secretary of a country that proudly signed the Rome Declaration. I was in Parliament when it went through, the Rome Declaration to set up the ICC. And there was opposition from some Conservatives who wanted the armed forces exempt from it, but that didn't happen. It went through in the way it should have done, and we are part of the ICC. And so the idea that the Foreign Secretary would challenge the Chief Prosecutor, who's a man who should be treated with respect, with great integrity, and in a very, very difficult job, to be threatened by one of the original signatories of the Rome Declaration is absolutely appalling and shocking. And so it's interesting that you reported it, well done. Le Monde, which is a pretty brave paper at the best of times, reported it. British media, I've seen nothing of it anywhere. I've seen it mentioned on social media, but not the British media. So let's get the story out there. And Cameron, who's a member of the House of Lords, at some point you have to answer questions about this.
Yeah, I should note that we approached Cameron for comment multiple times and he didn't respond. Now,
Well, he's a very busy man. So
Francesca Albanese actually told us that threatening the ICC in that way is a criminal offence under the Rome Statute, and it's also a crime under domestic law, so it's a very serious issue.
Well, a case could be mounted on that basis, and Francesca is correct, it is, because if you set up a legal system, then you have to protect those that are making the decisions from intimidation. And so, for example, judges in Britain undertaking judgment of a case, I cannot approach a judge because I'm a member of Parliament and say, listen, sir, I don't like the way you're handling this case, so I want you to find in a different way. That judge would probably haul me straight before the court as being in contempt of court, and he would be right, or she would be right to do that. And so the same principle must apply in international law as well. So Francesca is correct on that. And so Cameron, in a sense, is in contempt of the ICC process. Now, I've heard him on other occasions call for the ICC to operate, as it has, against other leaders around the world. What it did in Sudan, what it did in former Yugoslavia, he supported all of that. So he can't pick and choose.
No.
Or perhaps he can.
Right. Well, he actually told Karim Khan, according to our report, that the ICC is one thing to go after Putin and Russia, and it's another to go after Israel because Israel is a democracy.
Wow. I remember a Tory MP speaking in the Council of Europe. We were debating the European Court of Human Rights, which actually has only ever made, I think, 2 decisions that are critical of the UK. It's a very small, in the league table of European nations that are affiliated to the European Court of Human Rights, Britain is very, very low in findings against it. The highest country of findings against it were Turkey and Russia before they were removed from the Council of Europe system. As Tory MP said, look, you've done too much. One more judgment against Britain and we're out.
Right. Wow.
And that was said in the Parliament. Now, you can't be prosecuted for what you say in Parliament, because Parliament has, in the case of national parliaments, usually has immunity. I'm honestly not sure whether that immunity applies to the European Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. It probably doesn't.
Now, obviously, the Labour government is very different from the Conservative government in many ways. We've seen a lot of changes in the foreign policy, such as, they're set to recognise a Palestinian state in September. There's been a partial arms embargo, sanctions on Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. But what hasn't changed, these spy planes flying over Gaza and passing intelligence, we now know, to the Israeli military. And the Ministry of Defence insists this is for hostage rescue. Yeah. The British media haven't reported much on these surveillance flights until very recently, but you've asked quite a lot of questions in Parliament about them, and the other independents have as well. Do you fear that Britain is complicit in genocide?
You have to ask yourself the question, what are these flights for? And there's an awful lot of them. And we now know what they do, because they apparently privatised the last surveillance flights to another company to sort of fly over Gaza and presume American company take pictures and so on, but the pilot forgot to turn off the transponder. Bit of a security breach there. So he left the transponder on. So anyone, anywhere in the world could see exactly what this plane was doing if you follow it on those websites. And it showed circles getting smaller and smaller all over Gaza. I've asked numerous questions about this and was always told either it's security, we can't talk about it, or I was told it was all to do with helping a hostage release. Well, it's a very strange way of helping hostage release to take photographs from above the air. If the hostages are being held in tunnels under Gaza, well, a photograph isn't going to help of the ground above. It's nonsense. I have always felt that the real purpose was to supply information to Israel to know where to bomb, and that if that argument can be sustained, then Britain is even more complicit in the genocidal acts of bombing schools, hospitals, and people's homes.
I recently asked the Ministry of Defence whether it holds footage gathered by RAF planes of attacks by the Israeli military that killed and targeted workers for UK charities in Gaza. And the Ministry of Defence said that they couldn't disclose whether they had this information for security reasons. A family of British citizens killed in Gaza last year in April 2024 also asked the Ministry of Defence about this. They found out that there was footage from that day, but that they weren't allowed to see it.
I'm sure that the footage they've got will show exactly what's been going on. On one question I put to both David Lammy and to John Healey, the Defence Secretary, was, if all this is so benign, then presumably you'd be very happy to share all of the information collected from these surveillance flights with the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. And they said no, they wouldn't. Well, if they're not sending it to Israel, they're not sending it to the courts, then what's it for?
It's extraordinary. Do you think that the UK actually can pursue a foreign policy that's independent of the US and that's based on different values from what we've been seeing? Because you've been talking about foreign policy your entire parliamentary career. Do you think it's possible?
It is possible, but it is a big mountain to climb. Tony Benn and I launched the campaign for non-alignment in 1987. Cold War still going on. And we proposed a foreign policy which would maintain relations with the US and all other countries in the world, but would be essentially a non-aligned foreign policy. We would take it issue by issue and not tie ourselves completely to US foreign policy. The Cold War then ended, actually only 3 years later, and that was a time potentially of enormous hope. Defence spending started to go down. The possibilities of greater sense of peace and understanding around the world, ABM Treaty, building on the Non-Proliferation Treaty and others, were all there. But NATO then essentially fought back in a big lobbying exercise of saying that actually what the world needed was a global military alliance called NATO. And then it gradually extended itself way beyond the North Atlantic into associated states. And so NATO has become a global military alliance, which is incredibly powerful. Well, that means that then Russia and China will also develop their own military alliance, which will be very powerful. India will join in. It's quite possible we'll end up with two blocks in the world, one essentially the BRICS bloc and the other being the NATO bloc. Well, in a world that's in danger of environmental destruction and beset by the most grotesque levels of human inequality, is it such a good idea to be spending this year possibly $3 trillion on weapons when we could be spending a bit more on supporting desperately hungry people around the world? And so it's about changing things. So, sorry, go on.
Because a lot of people say, a lot of commentators say that foreign policy is an issue completely irrelevant to working people in this country, and that it's ridiculous that you talk about foreign policy so much. But what you're saying is it's intimately connected to all these other issues.
We had the most obvious example of that this year. The government announced that it wanted to increase defence expenditure by up to $13 billion a year by putting the proportion of GDP on defence up a great deal to do it, and then announced they were going to take $5 billion out of the welfare budget for people on personal independence payments, people with disabilities who can't look after themselves, who need help to do it, are going to lose that help. Now, they eventually lost on that, but they're going to come back for more. And so we had a very obvious example, more on weapons, less on disabled people. How many people out there, or what in this park, if you go up and say, what would you prefer? An F-35 jet or personal independence payments for people with disabilities? I don't think there's too many people in this park that would go for the F-35.
Right. Jeremy, what you're presenting is a new type of politics. We don't really know what the new party will look like yet, but it's almost certain to transform British politics. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.